Hello, and welcome to this week's Inspiring Women Leaders Charity podcast. Today, it's such a great honour to welcome a very special guest and someone that myself and Jonathan have known and admired for about 10 years now, Alison. So, Alison Hutchinson, she is the CEO of Pennies, a progressive fintech charity which she helped to create in 2009. The charity offers a digital platform that enables micro donations that we all get to experience and use at the point of sale. Certainly for somebody like me who loves a little bit of retail therapy, whilst at the same time making small micro donations that make a huge difference, bit of a double whammy. So if you don't do it yet, I would encourage all of you to start because it really does make a difference. Under Alison's visionary leadership, Pennies has grown to become the UK's leading microdonation platform, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later on too. She also has a wealth of experience in senior leadership and non-executive director positions in the world of finance and technology, including IBM and my old stomping ground, Barclays. In 2016, she was awarded the CBE Commander of the Order of the British Empire for her services to the economy and charities. Alison, welcome.
Welcome. Well, that's some welcome, Leigh. Thank you very much. It's a real honour to be here with you. So thank you for asking me to share my story.
An absolute pleasure. And as I say, myself and Jonathan think so highly of you. So it's very special for me to have you here today. Let's start with the early life, because you talk a lot about the importance of having strong values and a work ethic and a community spirit, but that was instilled in you right back to when you were younger. I thought it'd be really interesting for our listeners to learn a little bit more about you. They're always fascinated by early life stories and how this has shaped us into the leader that we are today. So tell us a little bit about your background and who you are, how that shaped you.
Thank you, Leigh. Yeah, so I was born into a family where there was me and my older sister, my mum and dad. We became a little unit in the west coast of Scotland, which was just fantastic. And I've been very blessed to have a very strong family unit, and that is very values led. And I'm sure we'll come back to that in due course. My mum and dad were kind of living in the flat above the betting shop and very much small entrepreneurs trying to find their way in life. Over time, they then ended up creating an electrical contracting business, a bed and breakfast, a dry cleaner, all local businesses serving local people. And, you know, we used to be called Charlie's Angels. My dad was called Charlie, and my mum, my sister, and I were his angels. I think partly because wherever dad decided to go, we went too, and turned his vision into reality, which means from the minute I could kind of walk and talk and contribute, we were part of the mission, the community, the family business. And being a local family business, we did a lot in local charitable work. He did a lot with the Rotary. He would raise money. He was just one of those bigger than life kind of community people, really. But what I think that taught me was, you know, very early on, I did have to work. And some people would say, oh, is that fair? What about a child background? I had a great child background. But actually, I did have to work. And that was just the rules because we didn't have childcare. So mum and dad were at work. So Margaret and I were at work. So we were put to work. And I think the model that I learned from those early days has really stood me in great stead for the rest of my career. And it was all about the simplicity of, you know, customers are king. Genuinely, you do anything you can to find, attract, and look after customers. Customer service has got to be at the forefront, not just up in a poster somewhere, but genuinely going the extra mile for your customers. Yeah. Secondly is you've got to hire and look after the best possible talent you can, because actually it's the talent that delivers that customer and makes the brand everything it is. Yeah. And then the third thing was actually you can worry about profit, but it was all about make more money than you spend and keep your eye on the cash, because actually it's cash flow that most businesses end up tripping up for, not actually some of the other financial structures. So that's the third one. And the fourth and last one is, and invest as much as you can back in the community you're serving. Because actually, particularly in small business, it's those communities where you're living locally, you're buying and using local services, you're giving back to the local community. And if you can really create that virtuous circle of value, then I think it really helps organizations flourish. So that was very much my background and upbringing. And And I remember one of the times actually when I was about eight, I think it was 8 or 9, and my dad, I was quite good with arithmetic, not so good with words, but numbers are words. I would go numbers than words, but I wasn't bad at maths and arithmetic. And so my dad used to do kind of proposals for quotations for electrical work. And so it would be how many kind of meters of cable or sockets or whatever it might be, breaker boxes. And he would put down what the individual cost was and the number. And my job was to do the arithmetics to multiply it across, add it in, add it all up and find a total. And I would do that, and Dad would say, I'm not going to check it. And I'd say, well, you have to check it. If I get it wrong, we're going to lose money. He said, well, don't get it wrong because we can't afford to lose money. Now, when I look back, I am absolutely sure he checked that. But at the time, he was really clear I had to be accountable. So the values of being accountable, the values of checking how you don't make mistakes so that actually you can deliver the right outcome. So it instilled in me probably those areas of how do you really deliver a great outcome from a very early stage.
I love it. Do you know, what's lovely is the way that you've been able to fuse the work that you do today with the work around community, with those values around outcome and a commercial mindset. I just wanted to explore, because quite often when I'm coaching people, there's often a conflict when they think about morals and values and purpose and meaning, and then working for different types of organizations that put profit before, I suppose, community. And you've worked across a number of different industries, and it's very inspiring to see the work that you do in Pennies Today. But quite often people are conflicted and struggle with the types of brands and the organizations that they work for and with, because they can't directly see that connection between the organization, its purpose, and the community as a whole. And you've transitioned across all of that. So what are your thoughts and your insights? What's your observations, and how do you think people can reconcile?
Oh, I think it's very difficult. I think, Leigh, it's very difficult. I think if a company doesn't have a purpose, I think it's quite difficult to have a long-term sustainable growth. But that purpose is all about what it's there to do, and that's really, really important. You get a lot of businesses that are not quite sure what they're there to do. Well, you've got to really understand that purpose. And some of the challenges you have is big companies have that purpose, but then forget to communicate it well. And that's different from giving back. That's what is the purpose? What is that company there to do? Is it there to make you feel comfortable in your home because you've got a wonderful sofa? Is it there to help make sure you've got the safety of your house because the electrics have been put in place really safely and security? What is the purpose? You're not just doing a job, you're leaving an outcome. So I think purpose is really important. But let's be really clear, unless you can do that profitably, you don't survive. So I don't see there's a conflict between profit and purpose. You can only fulfill your purpose if you are profitable. And I think too many people feel it's one or the other, rather than the more companies I see with a clear purpose that's communicated well, the more profitable they are. And then the question is, in doing that, how do they want to show up? And that's more where the values for me start to come in. What kind of people do they want to attract? How do they want to look after those people? How important is actually having a proper business that's not just purposeful, that gives back to the people in the community, that looks after their people, that recognizes the value. And so for me, that whole kind of model that was profit, planet, and people is so important today as it was then. I personally am inclined to add peace into that, because I think in today's geopolitical world, there are so many extreme views. There's lots of difficult issues happening across the world. And even in companies, you can get politics becoming of different views, rather than can we find peace and harmony to deliver a great outcome, learn from that, make more money, give more money back, and actually be a really successful organization. And so I think the value set is not what's written in the boardroom and put up on walls, but how your colleagues describe how it feels working there. Because that's, if you know that you've really embodied those values, then actually that's how your people behave. And that's not easy to achieve in very large organizations. It's really hard. But I think that's kind of my experience if you take them each in little bits.
And just on this, because actually you said about the consumer and the customer experience and that connection between your purpose as an organization, but the customer experience. I'm curious as well, because we're becoming more digitized, very competitive. And I just wonder, how does an organization not just translate that through to its own people, but how do you keep that connection and resonance between the organization's purpose and I suppose people understanding that, so they buy into you, they are loyal to you, they connect with you. What's your experience around that too?
Well, it's interesting because I think in the world of digital, and AI is the most overused word I think around, it is absolutely critical and it will transform businesses. But if I flash back to the beginning of my career after being at home and university, then it was working at IBM. And our whole life was using technology to improve business processes and to deliver better outcomes across whatever you do. The only difference now is what would take you decades to do, you can do within kind of hours and minutes. So I think we need to, and of course, there's a lot more algorithms in there and there's a lot more machine learning, but technology is there to improve overall business efficiency and effectiveness.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away from the fact that customers want to have a great experience. And that means sometimes they want to just find something out really quickly on their phone. They've got the answer to the question and they can wait and buy later. And a true customer-focused organization recognizes that you need to give the choice and the power into the consumer and give them the choice about how they want to operate. If you're going to put a chat box on that doesn't really answer the question, that just frustrates the customer because they can't get to the nub of what they're going to do, I question whether that's actually putting the customer first. So I think, there is a big role of technology. I think it's very easy to keep your purpose because your purpose is that experience the customer takes away. And then it's what they hear about the brand they're operating in, and therefore what they believe in what that organization is doing. So I think in today's world, it's as easy as it was in the old world. It's just done in different ways. If I take, when you get a digital receipt, you can get a digital receipt that says you've bought this, or you can get a digital receipt saying, thank you so much for your business. We care about your views. If there's anything we could do to improve, please let us know, because we're always an organization looking to become there's ways you can bring a personality out that still lives what you stand for, regardless of the channel, the technology, or anything else. Although I do believe, and this is my bias, that this isn't going to be a world that's run by machines. It's a world that's run by humans and use machines to make things better. So we've got to remember that.
Yeah. I look forward to that translating across to the telephone systems that we use when we ring up banks and things like that. So everything is wonderfully perfect. And then this one simple system where you're sitting there for about half an hour and you go from one person to another person to another person. If they could solve that, happy days. I'm going to take you back to just the start of Pennies, because Pennies is a real success story. You were approached by Pennies, I think, back in 2008, when it was just a nub of an idea. And I believe you were sitting around a kitchen table. And for somebody with a background in technology and business and finance, this idea was presented to you. What did you see in Pennies as an organization that really attracted you to developing it and leading it?
And thank you for your kind comments. We've certainly made some good progress, but in many ways we feel we haven't even scratched the surface of the potential opportunity yet. So it's very, very kind words, but our feet are firmly in the ground with lots of marching to do.
The joy of the entrepreneur mindset. It's just you're never happy. There's always somewhere bigger to go to and to strive for.
So when it all started, the role I'd had before was I was running a kind of public company that was being challenged a little bit in its model, and we managed to turn that round, take cost up, put it out for sale and delist it before the financial markets crashed, which was obviously clearly great for my shareholders. And then I stayed with the company that bought it and helped get the organization to where it was really stable and time for me to leave. They didn't really want me to leave, and they were incredibly generous and kind of said, well, you can't work or earn for 12 months. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? I've been working in my family business since I could walk and talk. Working is my life. And that's when I actually went into doing a bit of coaching myself. There was a lot of other financial services CEOs facing into the financial crisis. I gave back to community my own way. I saw the children more and they said I was seeing them too much. So I knew I needed to do something else with my time. And that was a point where I was approached with this idea, which a few people had had about giving on a card. It was called something very different then, but they hadn't quite worked out what to do with it or what it was. It was just recognizing the embers of we were starting to use cards more than cash. So how do we, what does that mean for giving? And so when we sat around the kitchen table, we kind of talked and I tried to take them away from where they were looking at how can you use a card to drive giving and back to what is the problem we are trying to solve. And so what we discovered through lots of conversations was the problem we were trying to solve was actually staring us in the face, which was the most popular way to give then, and indeed now, despite the fact that we still have pretty much very little cash in society, is that the most favourite way to give is dropping coins in a charity box. Why? It's easy, it makes people feel good, it's always their choice, they know they get absolutely no follow-up from the charity. It's that little bit of, I feel better because I've dropped those coins in the box. But what was clear was the e-commerce boom was really starting to fly, so you're getting a lot more online. The role of cashless payments was really starting to fly. So the problem we had is, how do we preserve everything consumers and retailers love about that very simple act of giving and modernize it so it keeps up to date with how we shop and pay for things? And that was where the beginning of pennies came from. So that was the very early stages of our journey, understanding the purpose and understanding what we were there to achieve. And then when we looked at it, there was then lots of people saying, but how on earth are you going to do it? And we didn't know. So we did what I am inclined to always do, which is surround yourself by people better than you in each of the areas where you need help, inspire them to want to work with you, which is what I tried to do on a pro bono basis for quite a long time. And what we ended up doing is spending a lot more time understanding the model. So what was it consumers loved about that? And it was the simplicity, the one tap, one click, no complication, no big decision. It was just had to make it really simple. The retailers were the people that needed to put it into their checkouts. And I say retail with a small r. That can be football clubs, it can be DIY, it can be restaurants, it can be hotels, it can be supermarkets. So when I say retail, I mean all areas where a consumer buys and pays for things. And what the retailer loved about it was really quite simple. One, it was really simple for them. Two, they got to pick the sticker on the tin. And three, that actually it made their colleagues feel good because it was a visible sign of them giving back to charity. What did they not like about it? Actually, for a lot of retailers, sadly, there was a worry for staff where people would come in and try and steal the boxes, which is why you used to see them chained to pubs or chained to the till. They also didn't like the fact they were taking that money to the bank and there might be issues for safety of their colleagues. And actually, they never knew what happened to the money because it was just collected in the box, but it was what happens to the money and where does it go? And so when we found out what retailers didn't like, as well as what they did like, we then went around, so how do we make it work? And that's where all my technology friends came in. And we worked out this couldn't be two transactions. It had to slipstream the existing transaction. So we really built that technology model for what it would take to slipstream normal technology checkouts that retailers have. And then we worked out how we could do at least one or two of the ways of doing it. And then we looked at the business model. And for a lot of people, they're saying, you're going to get serious investment to make this happen. You know, this could be the next biggest thing in charitable giving. And a few of us were there going, no, none of us want to make money out of this. This is not a venture to profit. This is an opportunity to create a real legacy of feel-good giving where people can afford to give time and money and to really be a force for good in society. So we made two big decisions in those early days. One was that we didn't want to make money, we wanted to be in charity. And the second, which was made it really difficult for us, but even to this day, it was so the right decision, was to be independent. Independent of everybody. So we were independent of retailer, we were independent of charity, independent of channel, independent of tech partner. And everyone said, well, how are you going to start anywhere if you're independent? And we said, well, we don't know. But if you think of that vision, which is to make it easy and affordable for everybody to be able to give a few digital pennies at checkout, then we have to be, because
Yeah.
otherwise we're going to be restricted to channels or to technology or to charities. So that's the beginning of the chapter around the table and some of those big, bold discussions of bringing friends in that we went through to try and set the stage for the organisation that's grown over the last 14 years.
So if I think the some of the big barriers, and I think partly you've spoken about, well, actually, what are the big barriers to success? Well, you have to have a really strong hard work ethic. You have to take accountability, because it's no point having a vision, no point having a purpose if you then can't put the effort and the energy behind it. But some of the other barriers are often external. And being a woman-owned uh, business owner myself, and also a leader of a charity, sometimes those big asks are really difficult, or getting over the early hurdles of, so you've
Yeah.
defined your vision, you know exactly what's needed, you've crafted that clarity around the market that you're serving, you've built the model and the framework, and yet it's getting to the crunch point of, we need investment, we need to get through, like the hockey stick principle, where you're caught in the butt of the hockey stick, and it's not making that transition. And so many people are caught in that stage, and they either stuck there, or they just deviate off and they try something else and feel that sense of failure. Now, you've seen the experience of something different, and in that really tough time, how did you work your way up the hockey stick?
Again, a really good question. And for anyone that feels they're in that hockey stick, just keep the faith. Genuinely, you have to believe in what you're doing. And to believe in what you're doing, you've got to have two aspects to that. One is you've got to have it in your soul. You've got to have it in your heart. You've got to really believe in your gut that that is the right thing to do, and you know it. But you also need the data to evidence it. Because if you're an entrepreneur that's just based in belief, and when you're trying to test and learn things, the data's not coming back to tell you it's right, you've got to listen to the data. If you've got the data that tells you it's right, but it doesn't feel right, quite often you've got to work out why doesn't it feel right, and adapt your model till you get something where you get the balance of both that gut and soul and passion, as well as the data and the evidence to suggest it's a success. Because
Yeah.
for me, if you've got those two planks, then you know you're onto something. If you ignore one or the other, it's going to be much more difficult. And it might be, however awesome you think your idea is, it's just not going to be something that people will either buy into or pay for or support. So that's the first kind of lesson I learned that I would share with people. And that's really hard when you've got your great idea that nobody's buying into. But it's also the reality that if you want to get through it, you've got to be able to get through it and get out through the other side. So that's one little bit of experience I would say that I would share. The other is you've got to expect the hockey stick to be much longer than you originally say to people. Because if you make the hockey stick too long, people will say, oh, that's too long. I'm not sure I'm up for that journey. If you make it too short, they won't believe you. So there's that middle to being, how do you make realistic kind of targets, which you probably think is going to take you a bit longer, but actually you get people started on the journey. Because at the end of the day, a journey's got to keep progressing. It's got to start and move. And if you can't get it moving, you'll never get to the destination. So there's a little bit about pick your battles as you go and work out how you can inspire people, but have that reality check. So there's a bit about manage that size of the hockey stick, but don't worry if it's a bit longer than you think. Because if you've really got investors or funders in a charitable world that are with you, they will support you if they start to see the data that gives success. And if it takes a bit longer, it takes a bit longer. So don't be disheartened by that. Actually, be inspired by that. So that's this kind of second thing I would say I faced into that you have to manage. And then the third is, please ask for help. As an entrepreneur, you can be sometimes a little bit, no, I need to do this, or I think this, you need help. Everybody needs help. You need help from the coaching and the great work you do with so many people, Leigh. You need help from funders that are going to take a backing for you and say, right, you're going to be the first in, so what's in it? But have your principles. So, for example, at Pennies, we had originally a few charities that we got together who said, well, we will help you get it off and running, but we have to be the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
And I said, look, that would be much easier to fund, But one of the early findings we had was the retailer wanted to nominate the charity on the tin. So they will want to nominate the charity. That is a principle that we found from the data that we can't deviate from. So
Yeah.
they said, well, we don't want to do that. And in fact, some of them went up and did their own thing, which is no longer there. But we've supported all those charities through different movements because you've got to stay true to what the research and the data tells you, as well as working it through. So you've got to work out what are those principles which you will not deviate from, and what are the areas where you might have thought it was right, but you're still happy to change. And that's where help guides you, and picking people that you should be a little bit scared of or that you think are more capable than you. That is the best place to be because you can get wisdom and knowledge that you can learn from, put in your backpack and go faster. I'm a great believer. If someone's had a good idea, pinch it and improve it. You know, what's wrong with that? That's fantastic. Never be too proud, never be too ahead of yourself. Just stay grounded in what you are trying to achieve and get all the help you can and achieve it. So some of those were the things that I'd face into, but back at the core for pennies, because I had the belief and I had the data, we had to just keep knocking down walls one by one and proving people they were wrong by making it happen. And I remember the first partner we had was Domino's. And we were looking to go for a small partner to begin with. So I wouldn't have chosen Domino's, as it happens. That turned out to be brilliant. But that was a big, oh my goodness, if we fail, we're going to fail big. You know, we wanted a small one to test it. But what happened is one of our helpers along the way introduced us to somebody on the board, and the board had said, this is not a good idea. We're going to end up having an impact on tips on drivers delivering the pizza at people's homes. So I really don't think this is a good idea. So a certain individual called Georgina, who's absolutely brilliant, absolutely at the cornerstone. George came out to tell me politely that we weren't going to do this. I have to say it was after a few glasses of wine, which sometimes helps in some occasions.
It does, yeah.
It does. It helps lubricate. No, but genuinely, it was only a couple of glasses. But I then shared my vision, and she was so good because she challenged every angle and then left that meeting going, we are a technology-led business, and I think we need to trial this. And all credit to George, she got the whole business on board, and they agreed to pilot for 3 months. And as you know, Domino's are still live today. They're one of our most successful partners. And we knew we were onto something when we were all set up for the day they were going to trial. It was the 1st of November, not that I remember it well. We had our order for our pizza in. We knew it was going to go in the morning. We were ready to go. I didn't know people bought pizzas in the morning until I had teenage and 20-something. It's actually quite an important part of their teenage growing up life, particularly as they get early 20s.
Probably as they're rolling in.
Exactly. So we were there, and you know, we were the 4th people to click and donate. And it was at 17 minutes past 10 on the 1st of November. Like, you remember the birth of a child, I remember the birth of pennies. And for us to find out that actually there was 3 other people that didn't even know this prompt was going to come up, that automatically had never seen it before, it was never available anywhere in the UK, and decided to click. That was the moment we had our steeliness to know we have to find a way through all those barriers. So that's just a bit of background, Leigh. I don't know if that's helpful.
It's really helpful. And when I think of some of the women, particularly with the charity at the moment, they're approaching us. So we've just launched our business entrepreneurship pathway. And you can see how there's a passion, there's a vision, there's a hope, there's an energy. You can also see the fear, the shame, the concerns, the doubt, all of those things. But within all of that, there's some things that you've described, which is, you know, getting the support around you, but having the data, having that commercial mindset is just, and the financial awareness and understanding that what you're doing, that you can be true to your vision on the basis that you've thoroughly researched and you've got the data that sits behind it, so you can stay true to the vision for yourself. You know it's the right thing, but for other people, that when they become invested, they're wholly invested because they trust the process, they trust the data, and they trust your passion. So if you can combine that as a whole, and to understand the difference I'm hearing between what's a critical friend and what's just a critic. And so there are times in that journey where you've actually heard the critics or the naysayers, and you said, well, actually, yes, that's one way, but it's not our way, and to know what's your true path, your true north. But in the same sense, is to really galvanize all of that support behind you, that can help to teach you and just be the humble learner, the humble leader along the way. So I think it's going to be really helpful, for many of our listeners. And now, where you were versus where you are now, I think, is it about over 30 million, or has that changed again, that you've raised so far?
I'm delighted to say we've nearly doubled that. So by the end of this
Wow.
year, we're on track for raising, well, having £250 million consumer clicks by the end of this year. That will raise around £60 million since we started. And we'll have granted out to over 1,040 different local and national charities. And what's really exciting is this year alone, we'll do about 50 million consumer donations. And it took us 7 years to do our first 50 million consumer donations. So the pace of acceleration is just hugely humbling and hugely exciting. And I think it's back to, when we all have been through a really tough 5 years, we've all come through COVID and got our own stories and scars. We've come through significant increase in cost of living and the increase of costs for retailers. It's been a pretty stormy 5 years. And in many ways, that's where businesses either thrive or strive. It is really hard. And, we've been very privileged to actually still grow during COVID. We've come out of COVID in a cost of living crisis, and 70% of people say two things from our research. One is they won't bend down and pick a penny off a street. And secondly, that they actually want to give little and often because they believe that's the way they can afford to give. So pennies very much takes that little humble penny that nobody believes will ever be of value or worth to anybody, puts it together with all the other humble pennies and becomes a big tribe that can really do social impact and change in society. And so for us, being able to make that happen, being able to show the impact, we recently were delighted to welcome Superdrug into the family of pennies. And we do talk about it as a family because we're all joining together to be this force for good. It's not what Pennies does, it's what our tech partners do, our advisors do, our retailers do, our charities do. But Superdrug came on, they really tested us thoroughly. They were rightly so in doing it. They've got a very quick time frame for their customers to be able to come in, buy their products, leave really swiftly. They have been absolutely phenomenal. Marie Curie, There's Cancer, is their charity partner. They've done such a good job that every 2 minutes, their customers' pennies funds an hour of a Marie Curie nurse.
Wow.
Every 2 minutes. So if those 70% of people that won't pick a penny off a street could just believe and see the power a few pennies can make to drive such sustainable social impact, that's what our mission now is, to share those stories, because I don't know anyone that goes, I can't give a few pennies to that. And if it's always their choice, they can choose to feel a bit better about themselves and to be part of something that's driving social impact in a really meaningful way.
So how do you get that message out? That if I think about some of the times that my friends will say, oh, they've been to a gala and they've bought a holiday, and it's not about the charity. It's maybe about that they feel good, that transaction of feeling good, but then they've moved beyond it. So how do you reconcile as well I suppose that giving, that sense of giving, with the sense of actually we're together as a community, we're making a difference. Here are the stories. This is what you need to know. These are the bigger macro challenges. How do you connect a community that is giving to a community that is giving for a reason, making a difference, leaving their legacy? They're part of a bigger change program. And maybe that's a question for beyond today, but it's
No,
almost
it's a
like
good one.
quite a cold empathy approach to, just, oh, well, I've done my bit now, to actually going, we're in this together. And, we know the changes that we're making as a result of every time that we do a transaction, but we fundamentally believe in some of the causes as well. And we're going to do more. So almost like inviting a population to do more rather than it just being about the transaction. What's your thoughts about that?
Really, really insightful. And I'll share some thoughts, but I'm always open to other thoughts and ideas and answers. It's interesting because with pennies, you go through journeys. And unlike, as you say, the gala, where you might have bought something that gives you something else as a result, tickets to a show you've always wanted to go to, and actually you feel good because you've given to charity to do it. That's a very different type of giving to dropping coins in a box. And people used to do it because it just got the change out their pocket. And then they did it because genuinely, and I know I've said it before, but they put a smile on their face. They just feel better. They actually, most people don't read who the charity is. Some do, and I'll come back to that in a second, but they just do it to give themselves a little tiny little energy boost.
Yeah.
So that's why for us, we see that when you give consumers the option to give, there's some of those people that just go, do you know what? Don't care who it is. I'm just going to do it. And that gets a certain level of customer engagement. When you then work really hard to be able to feed back to colleagues and customers the storytelling, that's when you go from 10% of people joining in to 50% of people joining in. And that's when you start to get the real community. You know, the Entertainer Toy Shop supports about 11 different children's charities across the UK. And they have, you know, about 50% of their customers consistently give, because for 14 years they've been saying, thank you. This is what we've done with Great Ormond Street. This is what we've done with Alderhay Hospital. It's just phenomenal when you share the stories. So for me, it's about storytelling and making people feel part of it.
Lovely. Wonderful. And for those organizations that are a little bit reticent because they think that their own systems are a little bit archaic, they're not ready for a big change program, it sounds like it would be a huge amount of people investment, it will take time to implement them, and possibly they'll never be ready in the near future. What would you say to the organizations that are cautious about engaging in a process like this that actually makes such a huge difference?
I would say, of course I would, is talk to some of our partners that are already doing it. You know, we've got 150 brands out there that are now part of this Pennies movement, and they are our biggest, best ambassadors. So I think if you're an organisation that has some of those questions, yes, come and talk to Pennies. But I'm always a great believer of go and talk to the brands that are doing it and get the experience from them. And what we find is when we engage with those conversations, sometimes technology can be a barrier, in which case we say that's fine. You know, because Pennies works with about 60, 70 different technology, point of sale, payment platform partners now. So we'll say, great, if you're not yet Pennies capable, we will go and work with your technology partner to provide that Pennies capability. So it won't be now, but you've now given us demand, and we'll put it together with other people's demand, and we'll go and work with a technology provider. And then we'll come back and say, great news, we're now tech ready. Do you want to trial it? So sometimes it can be technology issues. But more often than not, we now have a penny solution in most technology, not all, but most technology platforms. And then you'll get the, look, we've got such big commercial priorities. I can't get my IT team to distract even for a small piece to do it. But actually, when you speak to the IT community, this is a project they can do faster than most others and feel really good about what they're unlocking. So some people now run hackathons where they take, particularly for digital online app, they'll take a day or half a day out. Their engineers all volunteer and they get 80% of the work done. They've had a few pizzas, they've had a really good time, and they've got a real buzz where their colleague scores have gone right up as well. So if it's that, then there's always the opportunity. And then if they're worried about the customers, you know, Pennies also made the decision in the early days to work with such a broad variety of brands that would never normally work together, but they're generally slightly different if you're buying a sofa as opposed to if you're buying a Domino's pizza, but the principles exist there. And so we have a lot of best practice around how do you make the journey brilliant for customers, because that has got to be great. How do you make sure it's not a big ask and it's really easy for them to do? So we now have so many areas of best practice to share with merchants that what we find is it's more about when they understand when they might want to do it rather than if. But there are a lot of concerns. And because Pennies is a charity, one of the things people say is, but thank you very much, we support our own charity. And we have to say, no, we support your charity. We just don't want to make money out of it. And I think some of those myths that can survive, we've got a myth bust to make sure that more and more people understand Pennies, what we do, how we do it. And that's why we've been, you know, really privileged to have an advisory board group now, about 50 leaders in retail, hospitality and pay tech that work with us as super ambassadors. And they do it because they've seen the benefit of Pennies, and they keep saying we're one of the best kept secrets. And I just feel so humbled really that these busy, amazing commercial leaders want to put a little bit of time in to spread the word, to try and share with others or to open conversations. It's, you talked earlier about how do you balance profit and purpose. I'm just so humbled by so many leaders that really are purposeful, where profit is critical, but actually doing the right thing is how they become even more profitable. And, a few people you say, as you know, ESG has come out, environment, social, and governance, and it's driven a lot of businesses to do things. I think that's true, but that's more about ticking boxes rather than genuinely embedding them to make really great businesses even better. And there's so many amazing leaders out there that really live this day in, day out.
Yeah. And so if you're the first best kept secret, I think the Inspiring Leadership Foundation is probably the second best kept secret. But we're going to change that next year, doing Ride to Inspire across the country. So I hope you'll be joining us on that one. Now, you've just touched upon leadership. So let's take this to a little bit more of a personal level. And through all this breadth, this depth of a career that you've had, this wonderful leadership across the finance sector, technology, as a non-executive director, working for some major global brands, and now in the charity sector as well, from entrepreneurship to large entities. What have you learned about yourself along that journey? The great stuff, the wonderful stuff about your leadership, but also maybe some of the tougher lessons that you've personally learned along the way.
Yeah, I've learned so many lessons, and Leigh, let's be clear, I'm still learning lessons. I don't think anybody ever gets it. I think learning and continuing to evolve is really important. I think what happens as you've been through more, and one of my biggest lessons is I think particularly women, and this is not true, many men, but particularly women have a much bigger monkey in their head that tells them why they can't do things and tells them why they're not good enough and tells them why they've got to be better than everybody else. Now, as I say, that's not just women. On average, more women have that louder monkey than anyone else. And I used to have quite a loud monkey. I didn't believe in myself. I didn't think I could make things happen. And therefore, I was quite lonely in the inside in many ways. But the way I overcame it was trying to be the best I could be on the outside to make things happen, thinking that I had to achieve it to prove myself, when actually I was trying to prove it to myself rather than to anybody else. But I don't think you realize that in the early days, because you're trying to evidence that you're good enough to make a difference and good enough to be part of somebody's team. So I think one of the big lessons I learned is, and in some ways that's helpful, but you cannot do these things alone, which is why I think the coaching work you do, finding someone, whether it be a family member, a mentor, a coach, a friend, somebody who can be passionately dispassionate. In other words, they don't actually care about the outcome, but they passionately care about helping that individual in whatever situation they're in. It could be a health crisis, it could be a personal crisis, it could be a work crisis, but you need somebody because you can't do it alone. And I learned that too late in life. And then when I embraced the world of mentors and coaches, my life was so much stronger and better, because it genuinely, they are such an important part of your leadership journey, but not being alone and not feeling that you'd created all these myths in your head that nobody else looked at, who were saying, you're doing amazing. And you're like, well, I'm not really, oh, I'm not really. And you can drive yourself too hard. That's a big lesson I learned through my kind of leadership journey. I think the other piece is, don't believe in the title, believe in the role. I hear too many people wanting a title. I want to be head of this. I want to be head of that. And I get why that's important to some people, and I don't knock it, but I've never wanted a title. I've wanted to have a role that stretches me. So what I really encourage people to do, that I did because of this, I don't think I can deliver, whereas now I do it because, wow, I can learn more and I'll probably survive, is take on a role that's probably got at least 40 to 50% stretch in it. Don't be there, I can do 80%, so I think I can do the next role. Go stretch yourself, because when you stretch yourself, you grow and you learn so much more, and it's hard. And don't ever think it's not hard work. The one thing I've always done is put the effort in and work hard. And I don't believe anyone gets to success without, not that I'm saying I'm successful, but gets through different roles and makes things happen without hard work. And hard work gets you luck. Luck is needed, but luck's come from hard work where luck finds you. It just doesn't normally land on your knee. So I think being able to really, really work hard, get into roles that stretch you, get into roles where you learn, and be a little bit, as somebody said to me way back in my coaching, with coaching me, saying, Alison, start to be scared of success rather than scared of failure. And I thought that was a great little phrase. And I still think I'm learning how to do it. But actually, when your voice in your head is too loud, you go, hold on, what does failure really mean? Because I think too many people think failure is bigger than it is. And
Mm.
actually, it's good to fail a couple of times, but it's not normally a failure. It's normally you didn't get a contract or you didn't achieve that profit number that you needed to get. Is that really failure? It's not, but we're inclined to use that word in a big or indifferent way, whereas making mistakes, not being as successful as you wanted to be, what's wrong with that?
Mm.
Because that's what life's about. It's never perfect. There's never a clear path. There's always nooks and crannies and corners and junctions and and I've learned sometimes if you're not ready to make a decision, then don't make it till you have to make it. Wait till you come to a junction where the only answer is left or right. But
Yeah.
when you come to that junction, make a decision. Don't dither, because if you stand still, that's when you're in trouble. Make a decision, look at your odds and turn right or left. And do you know what? If left was wrong, then you can always go left, left, and left and come back to where you were and go right again. That's not a failure. That's learning to be decisive, to learn and to change again. And those types of lessons I've learned, I've tried to share with others, but just tried to use to help me feel a bit more fear of success rather than fear of failure.
Yeah, I think this is the reason why it's taken me about 3 years to launch this podcast while Jonathan's going, Leigh, just set out to fail 10 times in a day, or, just do it. Just don't be afraid of failure. And it's true, actually, because I'm thoroughly enjoying doing the podcast now. Why didn't I do it 3 years ago when I first had the idea? Absolutely crazy. So now I agree with you about that stretch too. So living what we call living above the 45 line, that degree of stretch that kind of pushes you, because otherwise you're stagnating, you're comfortable, but you're stagnating, you're not learning, you're not growing, but at least you're safe. But safe does start to feel stagnant. How do you manage living above the 45 line? What do you do to set yourself up for success, knowing that you don't have all of the tools, all of the resources, all of the knowledge at your fingertips? What have you learned about that living above the 45 line?
I never knew it was called that, Leigh. That's my learning for the day. Thank you. I feel I'll be able to have a much posher way of saying it now, or more credible way of saying it. Really good, quick. Listen, one of my premises that I've been able to do all my life is go to bed knowing I've done my best. Doesn't necessarily mean I've achieved the best, but I've done my best. And they're very different because you can do your best and it not be successful, or you can do your best and it can be successful. But I think for me, that ability to sleep well at night, because even if it was not a good outcome, you put the best in that you could do at that point in time, is really, really important. And I say that because when you're outside your comfort zone, you
Mm.
do the things I suggested you do in the past. You get people on your team, if you're in a leadership role, that bring skills that you don't have. And
Mm.
by the way, it's probably fair to say most people that grow are in the living above the 45 line. See, I've learned. But most people do that because those that don't get to more leadership positions because they are a much slower growth. So you're not alone in that. I think people think it's only me that's doing that. Actually, that's what people do. So you learn by getting great talent around you, getting on really well and listening to your leader, learning from the person that was there in the past, doing the best you can do, and keep being curious to ask more questions than answers. As my dad says, you've got 2 ears and one mouth, use them in those proportions. And I've tried to, because if you can get more learning in a day than you do talking, you're going to grow and learn. And that way, that above the 45 line is going to get smaller every single day. So those are some of the things that are maybe not big thoughts or ideas, but just the human side of how you manage to cope. And I'm a great planner. So I think for me, on a practical point, when you go into a new role, I really believe in 30, 60, 90-day plans. You have to set out knowing what it is you think you need to do, getting agreement that you're covering the right stakeholders, and then be ready to iterate, but have a plan, because if you don't, you can go way off course. It's a bit like sometimes with my non-exec role on rather than my exec role. The reason I think those roles work well together is because execs live in the moment and live in the journey. It's like they're living the video or the film, they're in real time. Whereas as a non-exec, you see it in pictures and in stills. And you suddenly realize that the last time you saw them, you thought you were going to X and you found they've gone to Y. And you say, why have you gone to Y? I thought we were going to X. Now, there might be a good reason why they've moved, in which you go, got it, or I'm with you. Or it might be, actually, come back to X. The point is that balance of input is really important to help people and help organizations keep thriving and surviving and making a difference.
Yeah, lovely. Some of this reminds me of the work by, is it Carol Dweck on the growth mindset and not measuring by the outcomes, because that's really painful. It doesn't help anybody, but actually the process, the journey, and everything that you embrace in that learning, that growth, that ambition, and going after something, and not having that sense of failure, that the fear of failure. But also at the same time measuring yourself so you don't land on X, you're right at Y, is actually being really clear on what great outcomes look like. If we were to then look forward, because we've looked at the past, we've explored the present, what does the future look like for Alison? What do you see as your longer term legacy, your vision for yourself? Where next?
Oh, it's a really good question. My children often says to me, how did you know what you wanted to do when you grow up? And I often say, I don't think I've grown up yet. So I think it is very hard to look at that vision. So I don't know what it is, but I know what the ingredients will be. Certainly as I look forward, I would love to be fortunate enough to help Pennies be truly self-sustaining. And by that, I mean, it doesn't need any key individual. It doesn't need any key funders. Its processes are all driven in a way that it can manage itself. Because I think once you get to any organization that is truly, self-sufficient, it can really fly. And I genuinely believe that the microdonation movement can be a legacy that everybody can be part of and benefit for, way beyond Pennies, but just being able to give those digital microdonations is something we know people want to do, retailers want to make happen, and society desperately needs right now, particularly as fundraising is really tough. So genuinely on my card, personally, would be I'd love Pennies to be able to be at the point where it really can fly forever. And that's definitely on my card of what I want to do. The other one is, I think it's a bit soft in what I'm going to say. But when I was forced with one of my early mentors to define what I wanted to achieve in life, and he asked me to use a metaphor, and I said, well, for me, I love a starry sky. I love it when it's a clear, crisp, cold night, and there's lots of these bright, brilliant little sprinkles of inspiration. And I kind of say, look, I feel I'm one of those out in that massive, massive world of stars. And my goal is to try and help more of the stars around me shine brighter. And that's what gives me the real kick in life. So if I can have left this planet feeling like more individuals, more businesses can shine a little bit brighter as a result of me being a small part of their journey, that's what makes me really happy. And I can't do it all the time, but that's the vision and the inspiration of what I want to do. So what next for me will be trying to make more stars shine more brightly in any which way where I feel or they feel I can help them along the way. And that's the very personal analogy I would use.
So it strikes me that you've got a mindset of real abundance. And so with that becomes I suppose the benefit to all, to many. And as we look around the world at the moment, it's an interesting concept for leadership, inspiring leaders, or maybe Harry Potter's Dementors that are coming sucking life out of. And so there's something to be learned. It's almost like a scarcity mindset where it's based on fear and judgment and criticism. And what would your observation or your thought be to leaders that may be struggling with those concepts and what to lean into at this time? Are there any top tips, any words of wisdom that could help other leaders that might be struggling?
Be the best form of yourself. That's what I would say, is be the best form of yourself. What inspiring leadership can be passionate, it can be very practical. Inspiring leadership is not the same, it's different for everybody. What it does is, though, it entices others to want to do things. and I talk about inspiring to take action. You don't really inspire anyone if you don't have a cause as a result of it. You need to engage your people to go and achieve that outcome, or you need to climb a mountain, or you need to have an outcome as a result of that inspiration. So for me, inspiration can come in so many different shapes and forms that it's actually about making things happen that leaves a better footprint. And so what I'd say to people is, who are you and what do you want to be known for? What do you want to leave behind? If you actually really don't care about people, and you really don't care about the planet, and you really don't care about communities, and you really do care about getting a title, making it happen, don't try to be someone you're not. That's who you are, and you'll get a particular type of follower, which might not be people that I personally might relate to, but might be what works, and that's still very successful. It could make them a lot of money and could do them really great. That is just an individual person. You make your own choices. And I think it's trying to choose to work with people and for businesses that aligns with your value set, that stretches you, that helps you to learn, because you can learn from those people as well. Sometimes, one of the things I've learned over my last 40 odd years is to be ruthless in decision making, but compassionate in execution. Because for me, that's part of the decision. And when I've had to make the tough decision, and I say I, because when you are the CEO, you do make the decisions with input from the board, but you do make those shouts. Somebody has to make the shout. Sometimes if that's making a number of redundancies or cutting back a bit of the business, that doesn't feel good. Yeah. But if it's right for the business, you have to execute it compassionately. Yeah. That's what I would say.
Lovely. Alison, is there anything more that you want to share before we finish off today?
Is there anything else I'd like to share? I guess what I'd like to share is, well, firstly, thank you to you, Leigh, and well done for jumping in and getting started in this podcast and not letting it to be a fear of failure, but a fear of success, because everyone's got to start the journey somewhere. And I think the thing I would say to people is, and I've used this analogy before, you're dealt your own pack of cards, your own hand of cards. That can be your upbringing, it can be your family, it can be your friends, it can be your experience, it can be your education, it can be your apprenticeship. But you've got your own set of cards in your hand, and they're unique to your hand. Nobody else has them but you. And so some people have much tougher journeys for whatever reason that might be. And there's lots of reasons. Some have easier journeys, but it's not necessarily those with easier journeys that are the most successful and fulfilled. It's about play the pack of cards you've got. And if it's not the pack you like, play one down and get a set of pack you want. And just remember that everybody really is in control of their own pack of cards. And however tough it feels, it's whatever decision you make, whatever choice you make, and to get the help, as we've said through this last hour or so we've been speaking, to help you. You don't need to be alone, but you need to play your cards. You need to be you, and you need to make sure that you try and do the best you can do for yourself and those that you love and care about around you. And don't look at others going, what if? Because what if is what you do with your pack of cards. I guess that's the only last thing I'd like to share, Leigh, because too many people talk about inspiring leaders being at the top of an organisation. We've inspiring leaders throughout organisations. And it's those people that are changing the dial that actually end up helping the whole machine move so much more effectively. So maybe that's the last little thought I'd close with.
Wow, what a thought to leave with as well. You've given me goosebumps, and you have just not disappointed, Alison. I knew that you were going to be wonderful for today. We are so inspired by you, myself and Jonathan, and all those around you as well. I remember going to some of your Pennies events, and people were there'd been such admiration of you, but you're so humble and so giving and so nurturing of other people. It is about the collective rather than the individual. It's so wonderful to see. Thank you so much for the time today, and good luck with the next journey of Pennies and your own personal journey of making stars shine very brightly, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thank you, Leigh, and have a good time. Take care of yourself.